classic. Classic is it is in the morning time. Classic 105.5 and 105.9 on the FM band. Good morning to you wherever you are, and welcome to the Mid Morning Buzz. It's your boy here, JC, with you, keeping you company. And we want to say good morning and welcome to our friends that have joined us on television. That's on GBN Channel 7 and Channel 11, Channel 20 if you're in cable. If you, those of you that's on Facebook or via our YouTube channel, or you're following us on the World Wide Web at www.gbn.gd. Good morning and welcome to this live telecast. I have two wonderful ladies with me. Anika Davis, and it's the first time I'm meeting her. She's going to tell me all about herself. And my good old friend, she's managed to have Cadore, and she's blamed it on COVID. These days, COVID becomes the perfect excuse for everything, but that's okay. She gets that. I'll give her a bye for now. Elaine Henry McQueen. Ladies, good morning and welcome to the program. Welcome to GBN.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone who's viewing and listening. It's good to be here with you.
Indeed, it is good to have you here in the morning time. We're going to delve into a conversation that I normally refer to some conversations, they're sexy in the context that you hear it, and everybody goes, "Oh, you people, we're going to talk about that this morning." And then, because that's those that have a political slant to it, and it has the melee and the bacchanal with it. And then we delve into one that it is normally shredded in secrecy and hush, and nobody wants to talk about it because it is close to home in so many ways and others, and it is interwoven as part of our society. And the question is, how do we rid ourselves of gender-based violence, violence against women, violence against boys, violence on a whole? That is a conversation. But we want to focus on the Spotlight Initiative. Ladies, good morning again. Welcome to the program. Let's talk about the Spotlight Initiative. What is it? And its overarching objectives. And then we will expand the conversation from there. Who wants to take a first bite of the cherry?
I'll start off here. So the Spotlight Initiative is really a global partnership with the European Union and the United Nations, which is really focused on eliminating violence against women and girls. So it's a global program, and it's active across a number of regions in Asia, Africa, the Pacific, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean, which Grenada falls under. And the main agenda here is achieving gender equality. And how we're going to do that is by working under 6 pillars. And we're saying pillars, but let's think of them as categories. So we have the first pillar or category, which is working on the legislative and policy frameworks. The second is strengthening institutions. The third is prevention and social norms. Fourth, we have delivery of quality essential services. Pillar 5 is the availability of data. And Pillar 6 is working with women's movement and civil society organizations. So these are the groups who are on the ground and who are able to execute that movement. And, it's really a partnership, with the main partners being the EU and the UN. But we do have, UNICEF, UNDP, UN Women, PAHO, which is the Pan American Health Organization. In addition to local partners, the main local partner being the Ministry of Social Development, Housing and Community Empowerment. But, all the other ministries are involved and incorporated as well. The legal affairs, the Central Statistics Office in the Ministry of Finance. So all the ministries are incorporated. And, we have a project coordination and implementation unit, which Elaine and I are part of, to ensure that, it's a national coordinated effort and that everyone is working together to achieve gender equality.
Achieving gender equality, the age-old conversation. Listening to you, Ms. Davis, it is evident that, given that this is a global conversation, the issue of gender equality, it isn't just a local one. It's an international conversation, and that crosses social strata, ethnic groupings, and all those different factors.
That is correct. And when you look at the statistics, there was a survey that was conducted in Grenada in 2018. And that shows you how many women and girls are affected by violence in their lifetime. Out of that study, you can see that 1 in 3 women in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique are affected by physical and sexual violence. 27% of that being allocated to physical violence, and the other 10% of that being sexual violence. And here we're talking about intimate partner violence, so someone that you are intimate with.
Elaine, so we've gotten the global perspective of it, and here on the ground we know you've been championing the cause of and I know you and I want to make sure that I stay calm and I don't lose my mesh, because if I start this conversation, sometimes the emotion gets the other part of me. So I have to make sure I tell it to behave itself so that we can have a fluid conversation. We have been fighting this battle on ground. When I say fighting it, on ground for quite some time. Davis gave some rather really startling statistics. What's happening? What has gone wrong? And I'm just going to put it like that. What has gone wrong? Where have we gone wrong? How did we get to this point?
Right. The entire world has had a tradition developed over centuries ago that of patriarchy, and that of saying that basically man is in charge, but more so some men are in charge, and that they can use power and control over women and girls and other men too, to enforce that power, to enforce that control that they so desperately want to have over others. And I think in a general sense that is at the root of the problem. And it's not just what I think, that is really what the statistics, what the theories have shown, what the research is showing, that at the core, and that is what is wrong, is that some people think it is okay to use violence and abuse to enforce power and control over some other people. And for the most part, when we're talking about gender-based violence, we're talking about men and boys using that power and control and violence and abuse over women and girls. All right. Of course, violence happens in other settings as well. So and sometimes it is still about power and control. So there's violence between countries and among groups within a country. There is violence of one say gang against another gang, and the question is why. And at the core of it is about using violence and abuse as a means to enforce power over others, right? Now, we're in the business of ending violence against women and girls, and so our focus is on ending gender-based violence, ending that cycle of men and boys using power over women and girls. And Anika put it very well when she was speaking about the link between showing that ending gender-based violence against women and girls, is also about achieving gender equality, right? And that is within Grenada as well as globally. At the international level, there are the Sustainable Development Goals, you might recall. And of those goals, there are 2 which the Spotlight Initiative particularly supports. And those 2 are Goal 5, which is Achieve Gender Equality, and Goal 16, which is Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions. Those goals have been recognized at the global level. And Grenada also supports the achievement of all of the SDGs, including those, and hence the partnership between that global partnership, Spotlight Initiative, which supports Grenada in achieving this, right? So that I think answers your question about what's at the crux of it, and to show the linkage as well with the global partnership and that global initiatives.
And I'm happy though. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
But just to end to say that one of the things that's critical is that whilst the Sustainable Development Goals, we've identified two specific ones, we must remember that gender equality or achieving gender equality is also mainstreamed throughout all of the Sustainable Development Goals. And also here in Grenada, it is mainstreamed in the national development plans and several of the initiatives as well.
I want to ask you two ladies this a point blank question, and I'm asking it out of all honesty because sometimes we have these conversations and sometimes you get the feeling it's almost like it has become a talk shop event. Not that to say that the individuals that's part of the cause that isn't truly committed, but in terms of really addressing it, we highlighted the fact that this issue of gender-based violence, it goes across different cultures, different walks of life, and we see it where women violence has become part of who we are as a people, and it is manifested in different ways and forms, whether or not it is through organized wars, whether or not, look, we have now the Black Power movement in the U.S. What you see, this power, the issue of power seems to sit at the midst of this conversation. Somebody wanting to wield the power, the reign of power. That conversation cannot be removed in our society, in our construct. So since that the power struggle is always going to be there, how do we appreciate and accept the fact that somebody has to take control of somebody, but be able to fashion it in such a way that it's not at the expense of another race, another gender, another group? How do we do that?
Well, the issue of when we talk about gender equality, we are speaking about equal, everyone having the right to use their power, to recognize and use their power, and nobody should be having power over another. It should not be a situation where men think that they can have power over women, or that women think they can have power over men. The proposal that we have been putting forward and we continue to put forward and we believe can happen is that where everyone has power and there is power to do things and to work with each other, there is power over self, and therefore power within is important. So it is about how we think about power and how we are willing to use power. We are talking about then power with others, working together, collaborating, getting things done, and so on. Power to do things, so we have certain skills. Not everybody has the same power to do, doesn't have the power to do the same thing as the other person. Different people have different skills and talents, but we all bring it together. And of course, we all should have power within. We should be empowered. We should have the authority to make decisions in our own best interests, and those decisions should be recognized and accepted by others. So that is the kind of power we're talking about, and therefore gender equality is about shifting that so there is equality. It's not about it should no longer be about one group of persons having power over the other person, right? And that way we believe everybody is able to experience and use their human rights, whether male or female, and achieve their fullest potential. That is really the goal that we have been striving to. And we have made some strides, but hopefully with the Spotlight Initiative here in Grenada, we will be able to go further through those different outcomes or pillars that Anika described earlier.
Just to add to what Elaine said, I'm also looking at it from a culture perspective. The way in which boys and girls are growing up and believing what their role is supposed to be as a man or as a woman. So just addressing, those roles, even from the infancy stage as children growing up and learning about gender equality and same things that Elaine are saying, that nobody should have control over another person, but it's how you use your power, whether it's within yourself to empower yourself or with another person.
Let's talk about that. I'm happy that we've encroached on that one a bit early, because only last week, and it's interesting. There's a conversation that we had right here on Classic that focused on the same thing. And let's talk about culture. So let's take it home now, and let's talk about culture. What is it that drives? And I think to me there's two things: culture / religion. Where culture and religion, where some folks, they read the Bible for their convenience, about the Bible says this and the Bible says that. We'll leave that one alone for now, because I know some people are going to go and they're going to get hot about that one, but we don't want anyone to get hot. Let's talk, Anika, let's talk, Elena, about how we raise our children, how we raise our boys, how we raise our girls. So we've been taught that what a little boy is made of. What a little girl's made of, sugar and spice and everything nice. And what a little boy's made of, was it this and that and puppy dog tails and all the dirtiest of things that there is. So we've seen from day one to culture our children to think that it's a separation of their roles, their individuality, who they are, and who they're supposed to grow up to be. A little boy falls, he cries, don't cry. You're not supposed to cry. You're a man. A little girl, you get her up. Oh, my little darling, my little darling. Let's talk about that culture. And I think we both agree that it takes a cultural paradigm shift. Is it possible that we can achieve this?
It is possible to achieve that change. It is possible to have a society where both boys and girls recognize that they can cry when they need to cry, and they can demonstrate physical and emotional strength when they need to. We can have a society where men and women recognize each other as equals, right? With the right to do the same kinds of jobs, the same kinds, go the same kinds of places and all of that. So it is possible. How do we do it? We have to look at some specific challenges that we have in relation to gender equality. One of them is that, and it's coming from the Women's Health and Life Experience Survey. One of them is that of feeling that women's bodies belong to men, right? And that is something which we have to break. That is a belief we have to change. Women's bodies do not belong to men and boys. Men and boys, therefore, do not have the right to do with women's bodies anything they feel like when they feel like, right? So a woman is autonomous. A woman has her own makes her own decisions about what to do with her body, who to have a relationship with, for how long, what kind of relationship, what to do in that relationship. It's her choice, just as it is a man's choice to make those decisions, right? So if we understand that, then the issue of rape, for example, will not be on the table anymore, because a man will no longer think he can just penetrate a woman's sexual organs when he feels like, because he has, or he thinks he has the power to do it, right? Women's bodies do not belong to men and boys to do with as they please, right? So that's one aspect of the culture shift that we need to focus on. Another aspect of it is that what happens within a home is not private. What happens within a home influences our society. Of course, there are, when I say not private, if violence happens within a home, that's not a private matter, because it affects the society. It costs the society. It creates children who later on are hurt, who later on believe that violence is right, or at least there is no problem with it, and so on. The statistics is showing that a person who has been abused as a child, if that person is female, she is more likely to accept abuse in her lifetime as an adult. If that person who experienced abuse in a home is male, that person is more likely to commit violence against others later on, right? And therefore, violence within a home is not private. It affects society. It costs for the police and the nurses and all of the professionals. That cost, of course, is all of us costs. What happens, violence within a home is not a private matter. So these are just two of the cultural beliefs that we have to break in order to address this problem of violence against women and girls. Spotlight is attempting to do some of that through, for example, law reform. We are looking at some of the laws that need to change, how to strengthen some of the laws in order to create that environment where all of us in society understand what is right and what is wrong, what is not accepted. So these laws and policies will spell out for us those things that's not accepted and that victims have rights. And so a victims' rights policy has been drafted and will be discussed some more and hopefully then taken to cabinet to with the request that it be adopted as a national policy. And that's just one of the things that Spotlight is doing, and I'm happy to share some more with you.
You touched on a few critical areas there, and I want to shift the conversation to Anika. We talked about dealing with men, and how they see themselves, because traditionally we come from a patriarchal society where I'm the man and I'm in charge. Well, hello, if you are the man and you're in charge, and understanding, and even they use the Bible, and that's where religion comes in, that being in charge doesn't mean that you have to control. But we know there's those complexities. But in Anika, there's always the challenge, and Elaine hinted to it, of women seeing themselves, and I go back to childhood and upbringing, where, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to go to school, and I want to get a man to take care of me. Yeah. And our young ladies, they have been fashioned for the last 2-3 generations not to say, I want to grow up, be a strong, independent woman that makes my own money. And I think if a man grows up to say, I want to be a strong, independent man that makes my own money, control my life, women are taught this, they are taught the same thing, then that sort helps to heal and bring and heal a divine. Why aren't our young girls taught that they don't need a man to take care of them?
Exactly. And I mean, I think now we're moving in that direction. But you're correct. Traditionally, the woman is supposed to, that's what you're taught. The woman is supposed to take care of the home. You're more domestic, whereas the man is the one who goes out and, provides for the family. But now you're seeing a lot more women who are, they're putting off families. They're putting off, having a child, raising a family. And you can see that people are more career driven. And it's funny because at this point as well, you can also see the interaction of men and women, meaning a woman who is career driven and is independent and can take care of herself. It can sometimes have the perception to a man now that you are intimidating. You are an intimidating person because you don't depend on me for anything. You can take care of yourself. So that's also something that we have to normalize within our society, for men to also be comfortable with a strong woman, somebody they can't control, but somebody that they can have a partnership with, somebody that they can build a life with and work together to accomplish that.
What role does religion have, ladies, in addressing that? Because religion sits smack dead in the middle of this conversation. Some people may try to deny it, but it's the reality. We're religion, and we're a very religious society, and that's the reality of it. That everything we do, what we say, what we do, how we behave, is hinged on religion. Even for persons who have not been to church in the last million years, they hold close and dear values that is based on what the Bible says. And how do we separate the two without, at the end of the day, wanting anybody to think we're infringing on the spiritual rights, the beliefs, whether who is in charge, who isn't in charge?
Well, two things I want to say about that. One is that we respect, and we should respect, a person's decision about his or her religion, whether or not to have a religion and how strongly to adhere to religious principles. But the second thing I want to say is that we must also encourage our citizens to interpret the religious text in the way that they were meant to be interpreted. So, for example, in Grenada, and we're dealing here now, we're talking about Christianity here now, the Bible says that a man is the head of the home somewhere. It has that quotation, right? Well, the man is in charge, but he said, men love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and gave you. It goes right into, it's the same section of the Bible that says women obey your husbands in the Lord. It goes right on to say, men, love your wives, even as Christ loves the church and give himself up for it, right? Continue reading and interpret them together, please. There is another section which people have drawn to my attention as well that says that a woman's body does not belong to herself but to her husband. But it follows up immediately. The very next line says, just as a man's body does not belong to him but belongs to his wife's, right? Let's keep those together and stop misquoting and misinterpreting the religious texts.
But do you think, Elaine, that religious leaders, because it serves their own interests, because that's going to be one conversation, but even within the churches, there are some religious denominations that hold fast to what role the man should play and what role the woman should serve in the church. Some openly tell you that a woman's role in the church is just to sit and listen to the man. Do not have any active roles and positions. So imagine you go to church, you're Dr. Elaine Henry McQueen, but in the church, you're just Elaine that sits there and listens to what the man has to say.
Well, there are different religions and different people hold different beliefs. And of course, not all, and even some within religions, there are some different denominations. And not all of them continuously promote things that are good for society, right? A lot of evil has happened in the name of religion. Not necessarily the foundational principles that the religion is meant to serve, but the interpretations and misguided ideas that some people build around some denominations and so on, right? So wars have been fought in the name. People have been eliminated from the world, and they call it ethnic cleansing and all of that in the name of different kinds of religions and denominations and cults. So we have to try and separate those, and what we're asking us as a people in Grenada to be able to do is to discern, to find the wisdom from the source that gives those wisdom, whoever we believe that source is, and that we sift very carefully what we choose to believe and what we choose to act on. And that is, I think, without going into a lot of specifics about certain religions and I think in a nutshell, that's where I would want to end, that on that point, that we really think about our own beliefs and treat with them in a way that recognizes what that not all, to use the Bible itself, not all that say Lord, Lord,
shall enter the kingdom.
Necessarily telling the truth.
28 minutes gone past the hour in the morning time is the sound of classic radio and GBN television. And for those of you that's just joining you, my guests, Anika Davis and Elaine Henry McQueen, we're looking at the Spotlight Initiative, which looks globally and with a local arm on eliminating gender-based violence. I think, Anika, Elaine, education is and will continue to be one of the pivotal arms that addresses the issue of equality and inequality. Yes, we've made strides. We've seen more and more women being incorporated into mainstream. So we've seen it in politics. We've seen it in a different sphere of life. But yet there is a big divide. What are you on the whole issue of education? What would you like to see done, Anika, so that women not just be I normally refer to it where you give them the TV, but the men hold on to the remote. Where they are given the television, they're given the remote, and they get to program the television, and as to what happens.
Well, you're correct. I mean, education really is key. And, we've touched on it before, and, it's really about educating about the gender roles and the gender norms, especially, and I will always stress, from children coming up. I mean, that's where you make the most significant change with a child growing up. So, like we discussed before, and Elaine said, it's not only women that cry and only women or girls that have emotions. Men don't have to be stone cold. They can feel the emotions and experience the same things that girls or women experience. And, there's this thing called toxic masculinities, this perception where, the man has control over the woman, and the way they think about women as being less than them, making that aware to boys and even men in society now that, this is not okay. And the way that we think about, gender, the way we think about men, women, the roles that we have, we need to educate them that, this is actually a toxic trait, that, you do not have power over somebody else. And, just even a part of the learning experience or the education, having maybe even just a basic conversation between the men and the women to see their different perspectives, to kind of bridge that gap where the man can say, you're right. I do not have the power or authority to control another person. And that they can get the experiences from a woman's perspective, why should a woman be restricted to only certain roles? Or why should a woman have to be submissive if that's not what they want to do? If it is, then it's your right to do so. But if it's not, then it's also your right to do so. So, completely education, having learning experiences, and starting with children come up, but also targeting, boys and men.
Boys and men. What about women? Because very often, a lot of women, and we look at it twofold, how they treat with men in terms of their own perceived expectations as to what is supposed to happen. When we go out, the man is supposed to pay the bill. When just open your wallet, you buy your drink, pay for your drink. If the man tells you put your money back in your pocket, you say, boss, thank you, it is okay, I've got my cash. But in terms of in the home, because I think very often the conversation goes back in the home, because you in a lot of cases where there's single parent families, and I don't have the stats to back it, so I don't want to get into that. But many of our homes are single parents. A lot of our homes. But you find even in the case where there's a nuclear family, where the female, the woman, tends to be the one that proactively, while daddy stands aside and just comes in with a periodic scolding. But the woman seems to be the one periodically that tends to impart those values. And then those are saying, well, hold on. But it's the women that train up their boys to be tough nut, and the girls to be soft. So you hear the very women would say, mothers would say, well, my cock outside, hold on your hand. My boys can go out and stay out until 12, but the girls have to be in by 6 o'clock. And I've seen...
That's true.
How do we?
You are correct. So, it's really just changing that perception across the board. And you are absolutely correct in pointing that out. It's not just the boys and men. It's also the women who have grown up as little girls and grown up as women with those same beliefs that we also need to target and help with changing those perceptions.
But as you said, it is.
And if I were to just add here that through the Spotlight Initiative, what we are doing is, some of those are, for example, we are now in a conversation, one of the UN agencies is in a conversation with the Ministry of Education officials about how to incorporate these kinds of information within the HFLE, Health and Family Life Education curriculum, and also within the Safe Schools project, the Safe Schools initiative, which is already ongoing. So that conversation has started, and hopefully we will see the benefits of it rolling out during this year. So, and we're very pleased to have heard last week that the Prime Minister of Grenada has in fact spoken with the Ministry of Education also about ending sexual violence and doing things within the education sector to promote equality between boys and girls, males and females, and to ensure that the school environment is safe for all children. Right, so we were pleased with that, and we're going to build on that to work with the Ministry of Education further on the curriculum. We are also working with the Ministry of Social Development and to expand on the parenting education program and how parents, through that program, how parents can be taught to change the kind of socialization that happens within their households between boys and girls, and also then to make this home a safer place for boys and girls inside of their home, but also for themselves as mothers and fathers or other guardians and so on within the home. So the Ministry of Education the Ministry of Education as well as the Ministry of Social Development are partners in this. We are also expecting the Ministry of Social Development as well as some civil society organizations, NGOs, to work throughout the communities. Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic, for example, has just started a program called Foundations, and they're going to review also the man-to-man program and how it works throughout the communities, so that the education that you recognize as being very, very important happens within the schools, within the homes, but also at the community level at large and through various campaigns. And it is all in a thrust to prevent violence against women and girls.
The Bible says, Elaine, and I can spare not the rod and spoil the child. There's been a conversation, and I said, I guess that's a smile. He's like, oh, is he really going to do this? Yes, I'm going to do this. Because I want us to touch all the different facets of it. So spare not the rod and spoil the child. The Bible states that. We ain't trying to argue as to what the Bible states. Its interpretation and application is a different story. Then we've had conversations over time about the issue of corporal punishment. Children, they live what they learn. And we hinted to that. So I've grown up whereby, as a measure, as a corrective tool, when I do something wrong, mommy and daddy don't do. Instead of mommy saying, Joseph, Anika, Elaine, you know, what you did was wrong. Why you did that? Should that also be part of the conversation, where we go right back to childhood, where we really truly to get that cultural shift, where we address this thing from birth, how we ourselves raise our children. We are quick to hit them and beat them. So if I'm growing up where mommy beat me as a way of getting my attention, does that in any way have an impact psychologically on both genders or sexes, that I'm going to have to hit to get your attention, or may have to raise my voice in order for you to understand? I ain't making joke.
It does have an effect. The statistic shows that a child who has experienced violence later on is more likely, not always, but is more likely to either commit violence or accept violence in their lives. The parenting education program in the Ministry of Social Development does in fact promote discipline, but not punishment. And therefore, it recognizes that children should be disciplined, but not punished in ways that certainly not corporal punishment, and that they should be reasoned with. They should be, so they can understand what is wrong about what they're doing. It has to be age appropriate, of course, because children are at different ages and stages of development. And the way one does that with a 5-year-old is going to be different from a 15-year-old. And the parenting education program helps parents to understand those differences. The issue of parents abusing children or educators and others abusing children is totally not tolerated. And I don't know, there might be some ways in which the state can make that absolutely clear. The discussion has come up over and over again. The scriptural text that you started with, Joseph, that about sparing the rod. I've heard a religious leader, funny enough, only one in my lifetime, explain it as follows: that when the Bible speaks about rod, the Bible is usually referring to shepherds using that rod. And I must say that religious leader was Reverend Osbert James, who explained it to me this way. And the way in which a shepherd uses a rod has never been to hit the sheep, but the rod of correction was used to nudge the sheep or the lamb in certain directions. So if that lamb is falling over a cliff, they would stretch that long rod out to block the way so that that lamb will not end up falling over the cliff. It's not used to hit the sheep and make the sheep or kill the sheep,
or to inflict pain
like that,
or discomfort.
So it's not about inflicting pain. And so the rod of correction as used in the Bible is used in the context of a shepherd guiding the sheep, and that's an explanation which, as I say, came from one religious leader. I'm not sure if there are others who are using that explanation, but I certainly hope so. We certainly do not expect then that parents should renege on their responsibility to discipline their children or have their children grow up in discipline and learn the ways of the society and so on. But it should not mean that the child has to be hurting, whether physically or emotionally, about it, because that hurt in itself means that the child is likely to retaliate or learn negative ways of responding to situations and so on, and that is not good for society.
Anika, do you agree or disagree?
I mean, I agree with what Elaine said, especially because, when you see it, it makes sense. So, for example, I have a friend with a 5-year-old child. If the child does something wrong and you beat the child, all they know is, it was wrong, I got licks, and that is the punishment. But is there an actual understanding of why what you did was wrong and why you shouldn't do it again? Mm-hmm. So whenever she has a conversation with the child, usually there's no licks involved, right? It's sit down and an explanation of what you did was wrong. It affected this other person in this way. You shouldn't do it again because, you don't want to hurt that other person and you wouldn't like for that other person to do the same thing to you. So you wouldn't do it again. And then you see now the process taking place where the child is actually understanding what they did, what the consequences of their actions were, and why they shouldn't do it again. Taking that as a child now and growing up into an adult and dealing with conflict with another adult, you can already see that the approach is going to be different as opposed to, retaliating or lashing out or resorting to violence.
And I'm agreeing 100%. I mean, there are individuals that I know, and as I said, I grew up, and I normally make reference to openly. I know he probably gonna be somewhere. He's probably fretting. But one of my younger brothers, he grew up and he told folks that all licks did to him was burn his skin. Now I stopped got licks since I was 9, 10 because I don't want my skin to burn me. I don't. I don't. I don't like. I don't. I don't. Don't even hit me, Elaine, as a joke. I don't want my skin to burn me. So as a result, I don't hit anybody. So for me as a parent, I've adopted the same position in Anika, where you have a conversation, and you'll be surprised that when you adopt that position, children, in my appreciation, they become more responsive to you. So why did you do this? Explain to me why. What are you thinking? Okay, well, Daddy, I did it because I thought, okay, fine. And I think that's where we need to have that national conversation. While I do agree, though, that it should not be separate every now and again, but of course, it must be not where you beat them mercilessly. If I have to punish you, I am going to punish you because this is what you've done, and you need to understand that in society there are laws, and if you transgress against the laws when you go to school, this is what's going to happen. But I agree, the whole concept of the use of the rod or spanking should not be to a point where it's because I'm going to really win at any cost, and you'd better not double cross me because I'm going to murder you, as they say locally. Ladies, we've gone over time, but that is fine. That has nothing to do with you. That's nothing to do with you. I just willingly gave you the extra 15 minutes because I understand and appreciate the nature of the conversation, and we have not even really touched the surface as yet. The Spotlight Initiative locally, what can we look forward to on the ground, Elaine and Anika, in upcoming weeks, months, years going ahead in terms of activities directly aimed and targeted at addressing the issue of gender-based violence?
All right. In a quick way, I'll say that we should expect to hear some conversations around which laws need to change and how to change them, and therefore some specific laws should be changed. We should also expect some conversation about the rights of victims and survivors, what they should expect from the police, from the health care sector, from the social care sector, etc., from the courts, and so on. We should also hear conversations and participate in conversations around how to strengthen the institutional mechanisms for addressing violence against women and girls, such as the Special Victims Unit, the Gender-Based Violence Unit, the Division of Gender and Family Affairs, whether or not we should have a national commission, women's commission, or gender equality commission, and so on. So the mechanisms for supporting and working on it, we hope to have some conversation around. We will also, as citizens, when you visit the police or the healthcare sector, the GBV unit in the Ministry of Social Development, and so on, we hope that you will be seeing improvements, because we recently designed a new standard operating procedures that describes how the officers in all of those settings should respond to you, whether you're male or female, whether you're from the urban or rural community, wherever you are. There are certain procedures they are expected to follow to make sure that you're not discriminated against, you're not blamed, and so on. And we hope that you would see those happening as the systems improve over time. We also expect that under the Spotlight Initiative, the data will be collected. The data, however, will be done and collected and shared in a way that protects your personal information, but is available that the decision makers and policy makers can understand the problem and work more deliberately to address them. And finally, under Pillar 6 and 3 combined, what I'm asking you to pay attention to and to participate in is whether or not you're with the ministries or one of the ministries or with the civil society organizations and NGO, whether it's a women's rights organization or other NGO. Look out for campaigns, for messages. You would have heard one recently aired by Grenada on radio and so on. Participate in those. Give feedback. help share the word, help spread the messages, help prevent violence against women and girls. And we hope that at the end we would have stronger NGOs as well, stronger institutions at the state level, and we will all as a society be working together to end violence against women and girls.
And I think, Anika, before we wrap, I'll give it 30 seconds. You would probably, Elaine, as well, you'd want to or agree with me that maybe the bigger conversation should not just be ending violence against women and girls, but because we're realizing a shift in society now where our boys are now becoming victims. Final word from you, Anika?
Yes, just to add to what Elaine said, all the activities you can expect to see, we also really want to just create a general awareness around violence against women and girls. To create that awareness of the statistics in Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique, as well as, creating that awareness for the support organizations that are available for victims and survivors, as well as, just the general awareness around the policies that are available to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence. And especially so that these victims and survivors, they know that they are not alone. And, it will just help to empower these women to seek the help that they need.
Helping to empower women to seek the help that they need, helping each and every one of us to recognize that we all have a part to play in addressing and ridding society of this menace. If you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And certainly, Elaine and Anika, there may be somebody out there, they might be interested in an advocacy capacity, or they may just want to be able to reach out, share information. How can they reach you, ladies?
They can reach the different partners that are working in Grenada on this. The Ministry of Social Development is the lead government institution that is responsible. So if they contact the Division of Gender and Family Affairs or the Gender-Based Violence Unit in that ministry, they will be able to contribute or to make a report and so on. The number at the ministry, one of the numbers is 440-2269. They can also contact the Special Victims Unit at the Royal Grenada Police Force, and the main number is 440-4739. They can also contact the Legal Aid and Counseling Clinic at 440-3788. They can contact the Child Protection Authority especially as it relates to violence against children. And the Child Protection Authority is 435-0293. So these are a bunch of numbers they can use, and they can volunteer, contribute, make reports, and so to any of those numbers. And we would welcome their involvement. Everybody, we would welcome your involvement in ending violence against women and girls and achieving gender equality overall.
Achieving gender equality, certainly that is the prayer. Thank you, ladies. My guests this morning, Anika Davis and Elaine Henry McQueen, and we're dealing with the subject, looking at the Spotlight Initiative and the new overarching conversation of how do we rid society of the challenge of gender-based violence. The focus was that on violence against women and girls, but I just want to add to it, how do we violence against in any form of or fashion. Ladies, always a pleasure. You have a welcome home here at GBN. Feel free to link up with us anytime. You're always invited.
Thank you very much, Joseph.
Have yourself a great one.
Pleasure being with you and to all of your listeners and viewers.
Remind you folks, it's about 5 minutes on to the hour. At the top of the hour is going to be the midday edition, a production of our News and Current Affairs Department, and will be presented by Chris Leader, John. JC Loves You is always a pleasure. Remember, we do this every day from 10 until 12. Well, I'm going to leave you now, but you know what happens? Absence, it makes the heart go fonder. And it sets up the expectation that we're going to meet again. The good Lord's willing, tomorrow, same place. You may not be in the same mood, but it doesn't matter. That's what I am here to bring a little cheer in your mid-morning. JC Loves You. I'm out of here. The midday edition comes up at the top of the hour.